prayer researchers identified 4 modes of prayer, and researchers pretty much agree upon this in the West, that we use today. We use these 4 modes individually or sometimes in combination with one another. The first of those modes is considered to be a colloquial prayer. We speak to our Creator in our own words, informally. We describe the problems or we give thanks. Petitionary prayers. Petitionary are also informal. It's where we ask for specific things or specific outcomes or maybe better health for ourselves or for others. We're petitioning the creative forces of our world. Ritualistic prayers, the third mode, can be considered a repetition of some predetermined sequence of words. Now I lay me down to sleep. Pray the Lord my soul to keep. That's a ritualistic, predetermined set of words, the ritual we go through at bedtime. The fourth mode of prayer, and there are some individuals who consider this a non-prayer because it is meditative in nature. In the meditative form of prayer, it's where you move beyond words, you move into a stillness. You're aware of this holy, sacred presence around you. You become the empty vessel through which the wisdom of creation may find a place within your body. And for some individuals, the word meditation and prayer are mutually exclusive. Researchers pretty much agree that we use one or some combination of these modes of prayer in the West today. And as I examined these modes of prayer, it became very clear to me that through the ancient and esoteric traditions, they reference a type of prayer, a form or a mode that doesn't fit into any of these categories. And that's what led me to ask, is there a fifth mode? Is there a lost mode of prayer? And if so, where did we lose it? And what would our lives be like today if it were part of our knowingness? In the lost mode, the fifth mode of prayer is a prayer that is based in feeling that your desire is already accomplished, even if maybe you haven't seen it come to pass in your world.
The Great Prayer Experiment. An amusing, if rather pathetic, case study in miracles is the Great Prayer Experiment. Does praying for patients help them recover? Prayers are commonly offered for sick people, both privately and in formal places of worship. Darwin's cousin, Francis Galton, was the first to analyse scientifically whether praying for people is efficacious. He noted that every Sunday in churches throughout Britain, entire congregations prayed publicly for the health of the royal family. Shouldn't they, therefore, be unusually fit, compared with the rest of us, who are prayed for only by our nearest and dearest? Galton looked into it and found no statistical difference. His intention may, in any case, have been satirical, as also when he prayed over randomised plots of land to see if the plants would grow any faster. They didn't. More recently, the physicist Russell Stannard, one of Britain's 3 well-known religious scientists, has thrown his weight behind an initiative to test experimentally the proposition that praying for sick patients improves their health.
Such experiments, if done properly, have to be double-blind, and this standard was strictly observed. The patients were assigned, strictly at random, to an experimental group, received prayers, or a control group, received no prayers. Neither the patients, nor their doctors or caregivers, nor the experimenters were allowed to know which patients were being prayed for and which patients were controls. Those who did the experimental praying had to know the names of the individuals for whom they were praying, otherwise in what sense would they be praying for them rather than for somebody else? But care was taken to tell them only the first name and initial letter of the surname. Apparently, that would be enough to enable God to pinpoint the right hospital bed. The very idea of doing such experiments is open to a generous measure of ridicule, and the project duly received it. As far as I know, Bob Newhart didn't do a sketch about it, but I can distinctly hear his voice.
What's that you say, Lord? You can't cure me because I'm a member of the control group? Oh, I see, my aunt's prayers aren't enough, but, Lord, Mr. Evans in the next-door bed. What was that, Lord? Mr. Evans received 1,000 prayers per day? But, Lord, Mr. Evans doesn't know 1,000 people. Oh, they just referred to him as John E. But, Lord, how did you know they didn't mean John Ellsworthy? Oh, right. You used your omniscience to work out which Johnny they meant.
Valiantly shouldering aside all mockery, the team of researchers soldiered on, spending $2.4 million of Templeton money under the leadership of Dr. Herbert Benson, a cardiologist at the Mind-Body Medical Institute near Boston. Dr. Benson and his team monitored 1,802 patients at 6 hospitals, all of whom received coronary bypass surgery. The patients were divided into 3 groups. Group 1 received prayers and didn't know it. Group 2, the control group, received no prayers and didn't know it. Group 3 received prayers and did know it. The comparison between Groups 1 and 2 tests for the efficacy of intercessory prayer. Group 3 tests for possible psychosomatic effects of knowing that one is being prayed for.
It is good experimental practice to standardize as far as possible, and they were all, accordingly, told to include in their prayers the phrase, "For a successful surgery with a quick, healthy recovery and no complications." The results, reported in the American Heart Journal of April 2006, were clear-cut. There was no difference between those patients who were prayed for and those who were not. What a surprise. There was a difference between those who knew they'd been prayed for and those who did not know one way or the other. But it went in the wrong direction. Those who knew they had been the beneficiaries of prayer suffered significantly more complications than those who did not. Was God doing a bit of smiting to show his disapproval of the whole balmy enterprise? It seems more probable that those patients who knew they were being prayed for suffered additional stress in consequence. Performance anxiety, as the experimenters put it. In today's litigious society, is it too much to hope that those patients suffering heart complications, as a consequence of knowing they were receiving experimental prayers, might put together a class action lawsuit against the Templeton Foundation?
Some theologians joined Noma-inspired skeptics in contending that studying prayer in this way is a waste of money, because supernatural influences are by definition beyond the reach of science. But, as the Templeton Foundation correctly recognized when it financed the study, the alleged power of intercessory prayer is, at least in principle, within the reach of science. A double-blind experiment can be done and was done. It could have yielded a positive result, and if it had, can you imagine that a single religious apologist would have dismissed it on the grounds that scientific research has no bearing on religious matters? Of course not.
Over the years, as I've offered this information to groups, I've asked people a question. I've done an informal little survey regarding prayer. And I just take an informal survey with a show of hands, and I say, when you pray in your world, what kinds of things do you pray for? More often than not, people pray for more money in life, better jobs, greater health, and better relationships, and they do it in this order. If we view the components of prayer as thought, feeling, and emotion, and our prayer is for more money, what is the thought underlying more money? Our thought is we don't have enough. Then I ask, what is the underlying emotion? More often than not, the answer is fear. It's the fear that there isn't enough to go around. Where's my mortgage going to come from next month? Something like that. If we merge the thought of there's not enough there with the emotion, the feeling is the vibratory template. That's what we put into our world to create. When did we begin to create the feelings for the things that we least choose to have in our world in place of that which we most choose to have in our world? What happens if we have the thought that there's plenty to go around and the emotion of what it feels like in that plentiness, creating the feeling of abundance? We have this common conditioning in the West. It only occurred about 1,700 years ago.
When I was back there in seminary school, there was a person there who put forth the proposition that you can petition the Lord with prayer. Petition the Lord with prayer. Petition the Lord with prayer. You cannot petition the Lord with prayer